Howdy folks, roughly 1 year ago I made this video discussing ARF and RMF file generation for spectrum analysis of nicer data in Xspec, and most recently I realized that there were some things that I said in this video that may come across as confusing or may lead someone to go ahead and do something incorrectly. And so I want to kind of clear that up with this part 2 on generating ARF and RMF files for spectrum analysis of nicer data in Xspec. Now, before we begin, I want to just quickly remind everyone that I'm an independent researcher using Nicer to facilitate my own research into mainly pulsar and magnetar timing. That being said, I don't particularly do a lot of spectrum analysis these days. Back in the day, I did quite a bit with NuStar with my time in university, but most of the time I am doing timing analysis, and when I do spectrum analysis, I am not doing any rigorous spectrum analysis. I'm spending at most probably 1 hour to maybe an hour and a half just quickly looking through for different features and things like that. So I'm not necessarily doing the rigorous kind of spectrum analysis that many of you may be doing to publish a paper or to write a thesis or anything like that. And that's kind of where this confusion kind of lies. The confusion lies in with what I consider to be a default or a general or a standard data reduction procedure with regard to generating these ARF and RMF files. I kind of use all those terms interchangeably, but just to kind of clear everything up, the way that I use those terms is the most basic bare bones way of generating the ARF and RMF file based on the recommendations from the Nicer documentation. So folks, here is the ARF and RMF page in the Nicer data analysis threads, and this should be considered your primary source of information for anything pertaining to generating ARF and RMF files. This is written up by the folks over with Nicer and NASA, and they are the authority when it comes to information pertaining to generating ARF and RMF files. As an independent, you should consider this video, and any of the videos I make for that matter, a third-party resource that provides supplemental information to any of the information on here. I always use these guides as the reference here, and when I am referring to a default or a standard or a general data reduction procedure, I'm going off of what is recommended in these guides. And so you should always look to these guides first, and then if you need more context or you maybe want some more information, consider, watching these videos as you are right now. Now, here you can see a split screen of my current working directory, which we're in the cleaned event directory of this particular observation of the Crab Nebula. You can see I've generated a spectrum file. I've already pumped everything through Nicer L2, and I have copied over my filter file, as we're going to need to call that more than once whenever I need to call a file that has a longer path. I generally just copy it over if I need to call it more than once because I'm lazy and I don't want to type in the path a bunch of times, then I can just delete it after the fact. Now, the following is what I'm going to consider a default or general or a standard data reduction procedure of generating the ARF and RMF files for you to be able to do spectrum analysis of this nicer data in Xspec. This is what I understand is recommended by the Nicer group through the Nicer data analysis threads that will be linked in the description down below, along with part 1 of the discussion on generating ARF and RMF files, as that video may also provide some more context to what's going on with this guide right here. So first we're going to generate the ARF file, or the effective area file. We're going to use Nicer ARF to do that. Then we're going to need the spectrum file, and we're going to next need the right ascension and declination. You can obtain that really easily with the coordinate converter tool at Xsarc. So here we have the right ascension and declination in decimal J2000 coordinates, so we're going to just copy those over, right ascension first, and declination second. Then we're going to need our filter file, and then we're going to need our MPU7 cleaned event file, and you should not be using any barycenter corrected event file. Then we're going to name our ARF file with the convention I use, which is a capital NI. I use the capitals to denote whether or not I have made the particular file myself, or if I pumped it through a pipeline or not, such as Nicer L2. That's why I use the capital letters. And now this is where some of the confusion comes in. You're going to need this last parameter called out wt file equals. And we need this parameter because we need to create a weight list file that is going to hold all of the different weighting information for the different detectors with Nicer, and you'll see more about that in a moment. I'm going to name this with the same convention, with the underscore wt.lis at the end, and now we can run Nicer ARF. Okay, now ARF is done. You can see it's done because it tells you it's done, but you'll notice here that we have all these different detectors right here, and basically for each one of these detectors there is an associated weighting based upon the effective area. And for generating the RMF file, we need to account for that weighting. Otherwise, we might not be doing as precise of spectrum analysis as we'll necessarily want to do, and that is where this comes in. So here you can see in our directory we have the ARF file right here that we've generated, but we also have this waitlist file, and we're going to use this waitlist file to generate the RMF file. To generate this RMF file, we're going to call Nicer RMF. Then we're going to need the path to our spectrum file. Then we're going to need our filter file. And that's why I have it copied over, just because we're going to call it more than once, and I don't want to have to type in the whole path. If it was just once, I'd probably just type in the whole path, but since we're using it twice, I'm not going to bother with that. Then we're going to name our RMF file, so NI, then our observation ID. And then lastly, we're going to type in detlist equals at, and then we're going to need the wait list file. As you can see right here, we can hit enter, and Nicer RMF is going to run. And this is what I would consider to be the default or general or standard procedure for generating the ARF and RMF file for spectrum analysis in Xspec. I'll let this run for just a moment here. Okay, so Nicer RMF has run completely, and now we have our RMF file, we have our ARF file, and we have our spectrum file. So if we want to now, we can open up Xspec, and we can load in our data with data 11. You can see our RMF file is already being picked up right here. We can load in our ARF file as well. And now everything is successfully loaded in. We can go ahead and start plotting stuff. We can start messing with things in here. But that is what I would consider to be the default data reduction procedure for producing ARF and RMF files for spectrum analysis of Nicer data in Xspec. If any of you have any questions, comments, or concerns, do not hesitate to let me know in the comment section. I will, of course, encourage that. So I want to thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.